Afternoon, everyone. It's Jim here at TutorDue, and welcome to one of our live streams to support Edexcel GCSE Business students who are getting ready for Paper 2. Next Monday, I think, Mike, isn't it? And Susan?
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. Afternoon, Jim. Afternoon, Susan.
Hello.
Great to see you. So Paper 2, we've got Paper 1 out of the way. So what we thought we'd do is a live stream that looks at some of the topics that are in the advanced information. So could come up in Paper 2, but also a little bit of a focus on exam technique on the shorter answer questions just towards the end of the session. So about 25, 30 minutes or so, no more than that, of quick fire revision. So if you're joining us live, have a go in the live chat. We know that, well, several thousand students have watched our previous live streams in the last week or two. So if you watch on replay, you get a chance to pause the video, maybe give yourself a bit more time. So who's kicking off tonight? Is it you, Susan, or is it Mike? It's one of you two, isn't it?
It's me. I have the honour.
Okay, right, here we go then.
Great stuff. Good afternoon. So we're going to start with some multiple choice questions. And the first question is on the screen. Which of the following definitions describes the term channels of distribution? Which of the following definitions describes the term channels of distribution? Is it the location of a business? Is it how products get from the producer to the consumer? Is it online or physical stores? Or is it selling goods over the phone? You can put your answers in the chat window. Only needs to be A, B, C, or D. Give it a go. Remember, multiple choice questions. If you don't answer them, you'll definitely get them wrong. So give it a go. A, B, C, or D. What do we think? Good way to get started. Nice little warm-up exercise. Channels of distribution, which is the correct definition? Let's have a look at the answer, please, Jim. The answer here is indeed how products get from producer to the consumer. Channels of distribution, how products get from producer to the consumer. Rather than location or whether it's online or physical, it's how the the products get from producer to consumer. Well done if you got that right. Remember, if you're watching live, you can join in using the chat window and you can put your answers in there. Just give them a go. Don't worry too much about whether you get them right or wrong. Let's have a look at question 2 then, following on from question 1. Which of the following best describes the growth stage of the product life cycle? Which of the following best describes the growth stage of the product life cycle? Is it the stage where sales increase at their fastest rate as the product becomes more well known? If you think that, put A. If you think it's the stage where sales are at their highest but the rate of growth slows, put B. If you think it's the stage where sales begin to fall as the product is no longer useful or relevant, put C. And if you think that it is the stage where a new product is launched onto a market, put D. A, B, C, or D is what we're looking for here. Thank you for the ones we've had through so far. Keep them coming. Thank you. I think there may be some issues with the speed at which people are able to respond here. Thank you for the answers we've had here. Let's have a look at the answer for question 2, please, Jim. The slow mode has now been disabled. Well done, those that put A. The stage where sales increase at their fastest as the product becomes more well known. That's obviously the growth stage. The other 3 answers refer to other stages in the product life cycle. Okay, so we've got maturity, we've got decline, and we've got introduction. Question 3, please, Jim. So which of the following definitions best describes sponsorship? Which of the following definitions best describes sponsorship? It's good to see people keeping score privately, keeping score of how many they get right here. Which is the best definition of sponsorship? Is it the way a business communicates with the media? Is it short-term incentives that encourage people to buy a product? Is it when businesses donate money to an organization, event, or team in return for their name being prominently displayed at the event? Or is it a distinctive name symbol design that can be linked to a business or product range? Do you think it's A, B, C, or D? Good practice here. If you know what this is, test yourself. Do you know what the other 3 refer to? And just to clarify, absolutely fine if you want to share your scores in the chat window. That's okay. Just want people to be able to join in. Answer for question 3 looks like C is the most popular. And that's because C is correct. Sponsorship is where businesses donate money to an organization, event, or team in return for their name being prominently displayed. The way in which the business communicates with the media, short-term incentives to encourage people to buy a product, distinctive name, symbol, design, all other forms of promotion. Do you know what they are? Question 4, please. Which of the following best describes the term gross profit? So finance now. Which of the following best describes the term gross profit? Is it the direct costs of generating the sales received during the accounting period? Is it the profit made after cost of sales, operating expenses, and interest have been deducted from revenue? Is it the amount a business makes from selling its products over a particular time period? Or is it the profit made after cost of sales has been deducted from revenue? Quandar doing very well, keeping us appraised of their score as well. Tom perhaps not quite so sure. I got the letter and the question mark in there, but thanks for your response, and thanks Elise as well. We've got general agreement here. We're looking like D is the most popular. So D is gross profit. Gross profit is sales revenue minus cost of sales. Cost of sales, direct costs or production costs. So gross profit is revenue minus cost of sales. The operating costs can then be deducted to get operating profit, and then we can deduct interest to get net profit for the year. Let's look at question 5. Which of the following best describes the term net profit margin? Net profit margin. Is it A, a ratio that compares net profit earned in a period with the revenue figure for the same period expressed as a percentage? Is it a ratio that compares the gross profit earned in a period with the revenue figure for the same period expressed as a percentage? Or it shows how much profit or loss the business has made from its sales during the accounting period? Finally, is it D? It shows how much the business is worth at a particular moment in time. A, B, C, or D. We're looking for the best description of the term net profit margin. So read the question carefully, read the selected answers quite carefully, and then decide which you think it is. We don't have universal agreement so far from the answers that have come through. Yeah, general agreement here that the correct answer is B. But the correct answer, of course, is A, because it's net profit margin. It says net profit margin in the question. It's the ratio that compares net profit with revenue. So net profit divided by revenue times 100 will give the net profit margin. The gross profit margin is what B is referring to. It was indeed A. Some people hedged their bets and gave two answers. Remember, if you do that in an exam, if it's not clear which answer you've given, then you will get it wrong, even if one of the ones you've selected is incorrect, assuming obviously it's a 1 mark multiple choice question. Susan, that concludes the multiple choice questions. I'll hand over to you for the next activity.
Thanks, Mike. So what we're going to do in this activity is look at a series of responses that are attempting to answer the same question. And all I'd like you to do is to read each of the responses and see if you can correctly work out what the question is that they're attempting to answer, and also how many marks you think the question is worth. So there's 3 different responses. So let's take a look at the first one. So answer 1, a business that sells shares to others. This will help a business raise finance. So what do you think the question is that this answer is attempting to respond to? So answers in the chat window, please. So have a reread of that answer and see what you think. So we've got some answers coming in. One saying the question would be worth 2 marks, but what would the question be? Let's have a look at answer 2 to see if that gives you any more clues. So a business that offers shares for sale to the general public on a stock exchange. So what we're looking for is the specific question that would appear in the question paper that these answers are attempting to respond to. So how many marks do you think this question would be worth based on the answers that you can see? So we've got what is a PLC, what is venture capital, public limited. So let's take a look at the last answer. So it's a large business that often has profit maximisation as an objective. So has your opinion changed of what the question is and how many marks it would be? So we've got lots of different responses in the chat window. Some people are saying it's worth 9 marks. So let's take a look at the actual question. So it is define public limited company, and it's actually worth just 1 mark. So looking at those responses, which one or how many of those answers are actually specifically answering that question set? So 1, 2, 3, all of them, none of them. So have a look at those answers again. Now you know the question. Which of those answers, if any, are responding exactly to that question? So Crocodile is saying option 2. We've got another person saying all 3. So let's take a look at how these answers would be assessed by an examiner. So the first one, a business that sells shares to others. This would help a business raise finance. This is 0 marks because yes, a public limited company does sell shares to others. However, so does a private limited company. And therefore, that answer isn't specific enough for a 1 mark define question to perhaps get the marks. So dependent on the examining meeting where all the examiners come together and decide on the mark scheme and the allocation of the marks, that possibly could be too vague. So you need to bear that in mind when you're answering define questions. This will help a business raise finance. So somebody said that the first answer would be responding to a 2-mark question. Well, actually, it's 1 mark. So this student has over answered, so just wasting time. So if you over answer on every single question at the start of the paper in section A, you are not going to get onto those 9 or 12 mark questions, or they're going to be rushed, and therefore you're not going to maximise your marks. Answer 2, in contrast, is worth 1 mark. So a business that offers shares for sale to the general public on a stock exchange. This would give 1 mark because the examiner would be 100% confident that the candidate or the student knows what a public limited company is. In terms of answer 3, again, this answer is too vague. It links to profit maximisation. Some private limited companies are large and may have that objective as well. So therefore, again, 0 marks. So a top tip, if we could just press the Thank you. So it's top tip you should need to remember when you are answering any short answer question or a longer answer question in the exam is you should be able to work out what the question is when you reread your answer. And this is easy to do when you've got a low tariff question. So when you look at your answer, if you think actually it's not specifically answering that question set, you've drifted away from it, you need to go back and amend your answer to ensure you gain the mark. So let's have a look at some top tips for define questions. So each of those multiple choice questions were referring to definitions that Mike went through, and there will be a definition question that will appear at the start of section C this year when you sit your Edexcel paper on Monday. So even though this question appears in section C and every other question in that section will link to the case study, you do not need to link your answer to the context at all in this question. It's only worth 1 mark, so the answer will be right or wrong. There's no benefit of the doubt marks, which is why out of those 3 responses that I've just been through, only option 2 would definitely get the marks. So in terms of another prompt to show you that you don't need to link your answer to the case study is that there won't be an italicized business included in the question. In every question where you are required to write in light of the case study, the name of the business will be in italics. In this question, that won't be the case. So you'll know not to refer your answer to the context. As I've said, every defined question for Edexcel will be worth 1 mark. Make sure the examiner is fully confident that you understand the term, and any vague responses may not be awarded the mark available. So very, very important. Even though this question is only worth 1 mark, every mark counts. So I will hand over to Mike for the next activity.
Thanks, Susan. We're going to look at sources of finance. And first of all, we're going to look at internal sources of finance. So can you give me 2 examples of internal sources of finance, please? As always, answer in the chat window. We're going against the clock. Really good practice with paper 2 coming up on Monday. Here we go. There we go. 30 seconds goes by pretty quickly. Jim live in the studio there playing the instruments, and thanks to him for that. So we're looking at internal source of finance. We've got a mixture of answers in the chat window. Some people talking about items that are actually external sources, but I can see a couple of internal sources on in the answers there. Let's have a look. We've got selling assets and we've got retained profit. Selling assets and retained profit. Internal source of finance because the money is being raised from within the business. Retained profit, of course, is profit the business has already made that's being reinvested. Selling assets, they are selling items, vehicles, machinery, buildings perhaps that they're not using or don't require and raising money in that way. Some of the other answers that have been given in the chat window are from outside the business, so external sources of finance, which is timely because that's what we're going to look at now. So external source of finance, but specifically long-term external sources of finance. Examples of long-term external source of finance is what we're looking for. Jim will pick up the instruments again and we'll go against the clock. Another 30 seconds. Answers in the chat window, please. Off we go. Great stuff. Really good to see answers coming through in the chat window and people giving this a go. As I said before, it doesn't really matter whether you're correct or otherwise. The whole point of this is to give it a go and to be able to learn. I can definitely see some correct answers in the chat window. Not all of them, though. The key thing here was long term. So over a longer period of time as opposed to short term external source of finance. So I can see there we've got trade credit, for example, being put forward. Trade credit is a short-term external source of finance. Trade credit would be a short-term external source of finance. Share capital, selling shares, giving away a share of ownership, a percentage of ownership in the business in return for an investment. Share capital is a long-term source of finance that comes from outside the business. And the other one is loan capital. Okay, or bank loans, which is typically where loans will come from. Loan capital, typically long term. Okay, so external source of finance, money coming from outside of the organization, internal source of finance from within. Just be aware for the external ones, the difference between long term and short term. Well done for giving that a go. Susan, back over to you, I think.
Thank you. So we're just going to look at some exam technique linked to explain questions because they are found in section A, but they're worth 20% of the total marks in your papers. So in paper 2 on Monday, they're worth 18 out of the 90 marks. So really important that you know how to structure your answers appropriately for this question type. Because they're found in section A, you don't need to include context in your response because there's no case study in that section, and they are assessing knowledge and understanding only. So you'll see a variety of explain questions. So they'll link to a benefit, advantage, drawback, disadvantage. So those are the most common ones, but you may also see factor, weigh, method. Now you need to watch out for those ones because if the question does ask you to explain one method, most students drift away from that method and start discussing or explaining a benefit of whatever the question is asking you to do. And if you do that, there is a danger you'll get 0 marks. So just be careful. If you're looking at method or a weigh question, stick to the question that is set. Impact or effect questions can look at either a positive or a negative point. So regardless of the type of question that you'll see, they will be structured in the same way. So let's take a look at this. So in a 3-mark explain question, you need to identify just one point that answers the question set. So if you know 2 or 3 points, just pick the point that you are most confident with in order to explain with 2 steps or strands in the chain of argument or developmental strands. So there is 1 mark for knowledge and 2 marks for understanding in the explain question. So you need to show that you're using connectives. So connectives are words or phrases such as this means that, therefore, which in turn, or as a result, and they will follow the point that you have made. So you make a point in your first sentence and then develop that point with 2 strands in the next 2 sentences. It's really, really important that you show distinct understanding of the topic area in the question. So, for example, if a question asks you to explain a benefit or one benefit of flow production, And you said it will increase sales and this leads to higher profits and therefore there is more money for reinvestment back into the business, that answer would probably get 0. So even though you think, well, sales may lead on to higher profits, because there's no understanding of flow production in that response, that means it won't get any marks. So you would need to talk about a continuous production line or the fact that unit costs would be lower, and that would embed your answer in the context or the topic area in the question. Now, Mike's going to talk through with you some examples for explain questions by using the stepping stones approach, and this will really help you to maximise your marks in this type of question.
Thanks, Susan. So just to address a question that's come up in the chat window, that loan and loan capital interchangeable, that's absolutely fine. Understanding that a loan is an external, long-term external source of finance is exactly what you need. So let's look at a question building on what we did before with sources of finance. 3-mark question. Let's have a look at an example. So explain one drawback to a business of selling assets to raise finance. Selling assets we know is an internal source of finance. One drawback to a business of selling assets to raise finance. Well, here's an opening point. As the asset, such as machinery, will not be brand new, the business may find it difficult to sell. Drawback, of course, disadvantage. So as the asset, such as machinery, will not be brand new, the business may find it difficult to sell. What we're looking for now is an interconnected strand based on that opening point, and then a second one afterwards. The stepping stones approach encourages you to use multiple sentences and encourages you to use connectives to show that you are linking your points or your sentences together. So let's have a look at the example then. Let's have a look at the next strand and notice it starts here with a connective. As a result, the business may need to lower the price it sells the asset for. The business may find the asset difficult to sell because it's not brand new. As a result, the business may need to lower the price it sells the asset for. And then we're looking for another interconnected strand based on that. Let's have a look at an example. This will mean, another brilliant connective, this will mean the amount raised through selling the asset is likely to be less than the business paid for it. So we've got a point and we've got 2 interconnected strands. Remember, these explain questions all come in section A, so there's no need for any context. There is no context anyway. So the asset may not be brand new, so the business may find it difficult to sell. As a result, they may need to lower the price they sell it for. This will mean the amount raised through selling the asset is likely to be less than the business paid for it. 2 interconnected strands, 3 marks, 3 sentences. Doesn't have to be 3 sentences, but the stepping stones approach kind of encourages this, and good use of connectives. As a result, this will mean good examples that you can use. That's how we do it. Let's have a look at another example, and you can involve yourselves. You can make some suggestions here. So explain one impact to a business of raising funds through loan capital. So now we're looking at long-term external sources of finance, loan capital, one impact to a business of raising funds through loan capital. Building on what Susan said, impact, of course, could be positive or negative. Explain one impact to a business of raising funds through loan capital. Put your suggestions in the chat window, please. One impact to a business of raising funds through loan capital. Thank you. Some people have responded already. Some perhaps are still typing answers in the chat window. What might be an impact of raising funds through loan capital? Either a positive or a negative. Let's have a look at a suggestion then. We're going to have to pay the loan back with interest. Okay, the loan will need to be repaid with interest. Yeah, well done. So I can see that's come through specifically. We need an interconnected strand based on that. Ideally using a connective, perhaps as a result, perhaps this may mean, or something along those lines. See if you can put an answer in the chat window to reflect an interconnected strand based on that. So the bank, the interest is going to have to be paid on the loan. What's going to happen as a result? Okay, thank you. So suggestion there in the chat window, this will mean that this will mean the business will have to pay more. We could be a little more specific than that, I think. I think the expand comment is too vague as the opening point. Susan, you may have a comment on that, but loan can mean it can expand. Might be a little vague. Let's have a look at an interconnected strand based on this point. So the loan will need repaying to the bank with interest. This will increase the costs of the business. Kwanda, you said this will mean the business will have to pay more. Let's perhaps be even more specific than that. It's going to mean the costs of the business are going to increase. What does that mean? Or why is that? Why will it increase the cost of the business? Yeah, Elise, okay. Thank you for yours. And Tom, yeah, okay. Good use of therefore as a connective. I assume you mean fixed costs there, Quandal, yeah. Let's have a look at a possible answer then. So we've said that the loan will need repaying to the bank with interest. This will increase the cost of the business. Obviously starting that with a connective, it's an interconnected strand. And then we finish with, this is because the business will pay back more than it originally borrowed, which will lower profit. The business will pay back more, which will lower. 1 mark for each of those. Remember I said you don't have to have 3 separate sentences, but in doing so, it gives you the opportunity to use those connectives and show linking them together. Explain questions. There's going to be 6 of them, so they're really important. Okay, 20% of the marks. Susan, let me hand back to you.
Thank you. So just in terms of that expand point, I think, as Mike said, it's too broad. It's probably more of an impact than a point. And it would be more useful probably if it was in an answer that linked to a case study that was looking to expand. So we are going to move on and be the examiner. So I could see in the chat window some of you asking for an activity like this. So we're going to look at a specific question, which is, so explain one way a business could extend the life of a product. So I'm going to show you a response, and what I would like you to do is to decide how many marks you would award and any feedback you would give this response. So bearing in mind how we structure an explain question, a 3-mark explain question with a point and 2 interconnected strands, how many marks would you award? So let's take a look at the answer. One way is to update the packaging of the product. This would lead to an increase in profits for the business. This is good as there would be more money for reinvestment. So how many marks based on that question would you give? So answers in the chat window, please. So based on that response, if you were the examiner, how many marks would you give that response? And if you could give some feedback as to why, that would be amazing. So some answers coming through. So we've got 2 marks at the moment. Maybe people are still having a think about it. So let's have a look at the examiner commentary. So one way is to update the packaging. That is an extension strategy. So that is meeting the demands of the question. So that would gain 1 mark. However, the product life cycle is about sales over time, not about profits. So therefore, this is drifted away from the question. Remember, I was saying about how explain one way or method questions are really important to focus on the meaning and the demands of the question really carefully to ensure you don't go into a benefit or just put a generic chain of arguments such as jumping straight to profits, because this will result in you not gaining the marks. So this will lead to an increase in profits for the business. This is good as there would be more money for reinvestment. So the candidate has identified a relevant extension strategy, but then, as I said, drifted away from explaining this strategy. You must stay tightly focused on the question set. So really important message for you when you are completing your exam on Monday. So let's have a look at another response that is answering the same question. One way is to update the packaging of the product. By changing the appearance, the product may become more eye-catching to customers. As a result, customers may be more tempted to try or rebuy the product, which will increase sales. So again, same procedure, please have a reread of that, decide how many marks you would give and why. So we've got some marks coming through. Just give you another few seconds to have a think about it. Any feedback as to why you would give those marks, if you've given some feedback there. So great, let's have a look. So we've got consistency here in our marking. So everyone's gone for 3 marks, and Quandala said because it's connected. So let's see, we've got the same point. So we know that point is relevant. It is an example of an extension strategy. By changing the appearance, the product may become more eye-catching to customers. So this is worth looking at because we're explaining how that extension strategy actually works. As a result, so a connective there, customers may be tempted to try or rebuy the product, which will increase sales. So looking at the question, it's about extending the life of a product. So we want to drive sales, and that is what the last interconnected strand here is doing, or referring to. So in terms of the feedback, 3 marks would be awarded. So well done, great examining there. The candidate has identified a relevant extension strategy and explained this strategy with 2 linked strands of development. Obviously, you could include a different extension strategy, but what you don't want to do is include more than one. Stay focused on just one extension strategy and develop that with your 2 interconnected strands. Right, so let's take a look at some exam gold really linked to explain questions. Now, it's really important to avoid repeating the words of the question in your answer. If you do that, it could result in up to 2 extra pages of A4 text being written, which will gain no marks if you do that for every single question. Just get straight to the point, particularly in these short answer questions where you don't have to write necessarily in full sentences. So with state questions, for example, as well, which you'll see in your paper. Use connectives to show that you're explaining your point. So Mike and I have gone through some different examples. Try to avoid writing therefore, 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 because otherwise you sound a bit repetitive. Write in separate sentences. Now that is a top tip from Edexcel, because if you write in separate sentences, the examiner will then be able to see easily where to award each mark. Ensure the explanation flows logically from the initial point that you've made. Make just one point, as I've mentioned, and really, really important to show distinct understanding of the topic area. Do not just revert to the generic chain of argument about sales and profits unless you are linking it to the topic area in the question. And those method and WCAT questions have caught students out in the past, so make sure that you're not one of those students if they appear again on Monday. So examiner reports have said from the 2019 examiner reports that they will be used again in future exam series, and how they weren't particularly well answered in that exam series. So make sure you nail them on Monday. And that concludes our explain questions and
superb questions. Thanks for that, Susan. Thanks for that, Mike. I mean, there's how many explain questions are there? Did you say it's 5 or 6 in the paper?
6.
So, oh wow. So really important, isn't it, to follow that technique at the end there in terms of just staying really focused on the precise wording of the question.
Absolutely. 20%,
really easy.
20% of the marks.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. I was just noticing on YouTube, Susan, you just put that fantastic video up that is a paper 2 walkthrough. and well worth watching if you've got paper 2 coming up on Monday. And you touch on, don't you, this technique as well as technique for the longer answer questions as well. So really worth doing. Fantastic.
Each section's broken down, section A, B, C, in terms of the types of questions that you will see and the exam technique that you need for success, really. So,
well, hop over to the Tutor Do YouTube channel, well, this channel that you're on now, and check that video out for Edexcel GCSE students for paper 2. It's a walkthrough specific to the 2022 exam. So have a look at that if you get a chance as you complete your revision with the exam coming up. Many thanks to Susan and Mike for joining us for this session. And if you found it useful, give us a like on YouTube. Just click that thumbs up button. And don't forget to check out all the other stuff we've got on the YouTube channel, including lots of live recordings of our revision blasts over the last few weeks. And for now, we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good luck.